There it is again. The truth continues to be smeared as hate. Dallas Brodie, a British Columbian MLA who was recently kicked out of the BC Conservative Party after daring to state a verifiable fact, which is that to date, 0 bodies have been discovered at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School, contrary to widespread misinformation. The MLA is now being targeted, this time, by the First Nations Leadership Council, a powerful political lobby group. Now, this council is calling for the criminalization of speech of so-called residential school denialism, regardless of facts. But they've picked with the wrong MLA to bully. Instead of backing down, Brodie has pushed back harder by publicly calling on the provincial government to defund and condemn the council for its radically Orwellian calls. And what was the BC NDP's response? Not to protect free speech or the truth, but to join the fact denialist mob by shaming Brodie and doubling down on politically correct narratives that are quickly crumbling.
Whether it takes courage or whatever, I actually felt like, as a lawyer and as a person who knows that I have not said anything wrong or untruthful, that I needed to stand up and say this isn't okay. I have publicly stated that the number of confirmed burials at the former residential school in Kamloops is 0. This is the truth. A fact that the Kamloops Band itself also admits, and a fact that the Chief Justice of British Columbia has also confirmed in the case of Regina and Dirk last year. As a lawyer and an arbitrator for over 30 years, I have relied on facts my whole professional life. However, the First Nations Leadership Council, one of the most powerful lobby groups in British Columbia, is now calling for me to be imprisoned on the basis of that factual statement.
Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and in a recent press release, the First Nations Leadership Council has urged the federal government to take bold legislative action to legally protect against the spread of so-called residential school denialism and what they call dangerous anti-Indigenous racism and denialist rhetoric equal measure to Holocaust denialism protections. In other words, pointing out that widespread unmarked grave claims that sparked hundreds of attacks against Christian communities, places of worship, led to millions of our tax dollars being wasted, and our federal government unanimously passing a motion to label the residential school system a literal genocide instead of sticking with the cultural genocide as it was defined by the Truth and Reconciliation report. The moral panic that's led to all that has emboldened radical political forces like the federal NDP's Leah Gazin and the First Nations Leadership Council to call for those who speak facts that contradict the crumbling narrative to be criminals. No one is safe from the mob that I now refer to fact denialists, not professors, not lawyers, not judges, not mayors, and certainly not now independent Vancouver-Quilchena MLA Dallas Brodie, who was serving as the Conservative Party when this controversy first unfolded for her, as the critic to the Attorney General. And all hell broke loose after she pointed out that the Law Society is being sued for defamation after a lawyer simply called for it to correct its disinformation in its mandatory training for lawyers that keeps claiming that the 215 claim at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School is true. But it appears Vancouver-Quilchena candidates have got themselves an MLA who won't be bullied out of standing for truth and transparency. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for the NDP's Attorney General Nikki Sharma or their government entirely. The race baiting continued in the legislature. And MLA Dallas Brodie joins me to discuss their outrageous response and why she felt it was important to call for the First Nations Leadership Council to be defunded for what they're calling for.
What makes you brave enough to go ahead and ask that and call for the defunding of the council?
Well, when the First Nations Leadership Council
made a press release that people like me should be imprisoned for speaking facts, this is something that can't be just left alone, in my view. I mean, this was a very dangerous press release they made, and the implications of that are far-reaching. So I had an opportunity in question period to use that time to open this topic up. And yes, it's an awkward topic, and a lot of people just want to push it behind and not deal with it anymore. But what the council did can't be just left alone to sit there hanging in the air. I wanted a response to that. And I think that that kind of group, I asked if the premier would defund this group for making such statements. And whether it takes courage or whatever, I actually felt like, as a lawyer and as a person who knows that I have not said anything wrong or untruthful, that I needed to stand up and say, this isn't okay.
You mentioned that this council, you referred to it as one of the most powerful lobby groups in British Columbia. Elaborate on that a bit more for us.
Well, my understanding is that the First Nations Leadership Council is the lobby group that sits above all of the other lower down First Nations councils that exist in BC. And it's powerful because it's calling a lot of the shots for First Nations in BC and speaking on behalf of all of them. That's a lot of power, considering how important this issue is in British Columbia and across Canada, but in British Columbia for sure.
I want to throw to the response of our NDP Attorney General, Nikki Sharma, and then we'll comment more.
I have to say, I think on behalf of most members in this House that I very much regret that that's a question that member. Just the other day, we screened the movie Sugarcane, and we got to see a little bit of the history of what residential school survivors have faced in this province, in this country. We got to see the pain, but most of all, what we got to see was their search for the truth. For us, with a very simple request to us, support them, help them, tell their stories and uncover the truth of what happened at residential school. And we all need to do that, Mr. Speaker. This member has been speaking very vocally in a very damaging way to survivors, and I want to speak directly to survivors right now. We believe you. We are there for you. We will support you in understanding what happened and being there to make sure we all understand the truth of what happened at residential school. Mr. Speaker, I was a lawyer for many years on the front lines with survivors and their claims going forward, and I saw how hard it was for them to get their stories believed and heard through the justice system. This member has repeatedly called upon us to deny the course that the Law Society is teaching lawyers. That is an important thing for us to uphold in this House. I know that the members across the way and a lot of us in this House support me in condemning that question and standing by survivors, and I hope we would all stand to do that.
Now, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I want to ask you, since there was lots of claps and since we couldn't see the whole room, what was the response like? Did you catch it from the BC Conservatives when you asked that question? Were they all applauding as well?
Truthfully, Drea, I wasn't watching. I didn't notice that. I think some did and some didn't. That's my recollection. I was pretty absorbed in the moment. I mean, I honestly felt like I was sort of in court representing a client at that point because I was doing law and I was presenting, so I wasn't really focused on what everybody else was doing. But I do think I recall hearing some clapping from our side, from the Conservatives, and lots of clapping from the NDP side, which is expected. This whole thing about denialism is that, first of all, there's been no denying of anything about the existence of the residential schools. I haven't denied harms that were caused. I haven't denied that they existed. Nothing like that. I don't think anybody in Canada, and I've gotten a lot of letters, is denying that these existed and that there were harms caused. So what they're asking for is denialism. I think that needs to be defined. What are they referring to as denialism? Is it anything that you say about the whole situation, or is it actually specific denying? I don't understand how they could say that I denied anything. Potential or alleged burial site has also been called out in the BC Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal of BC by the Chief Justice. Now, what's going to happen to them? Are they going to face imprisonment? How far does this go? Even the leadership of the Kamloops Band has said that there are anomalies, that nothing has been found. So are they also possibly going to be swept up by this proposed law? Or is it just conservatives? Or I don't know, what would be the people who get caught by this net? And what would be the words required to be caught by this?
Now, we have to bring it up. I haven't actually interviewed you since you were booted out of caucus, although I followed it closely for our viewers and readers. Tell us what it was like for you to have the leader of the Conservative Party, John Rustad, come out and accuse you of mocking victims of sexual abuse in a 4-second clip that was extracted out of a 10-minute video. I did a whole rant about what you really meant, but you tell us what you really meant and what that was like for you.
This whole thing about my truth and your truth, oh, my truth.
So I've watched the whole video, and that was recorded that day during that Zoom call, and that tone and what I said was, I was mocking postmodern cultural wokeism that says that every truth is a truth, and his truth, her truth, their truth. And I was speaking about the need for objective truth, one objective truth. What I believe is that what's true is that there are different stories about, people have different stories about what happened, but there is an actual truth about what happened. And in this case, we actually do have a truth. And so, so getting kicked out of so backing up on that, how did it feel to have staff within the Conservative Party take that piece that was, didn't sound great, but it was just me being me. It's, talking the way I was wanting to talk at that moment, but they clipped it and sliced it and diced it to make it sound just so horrible. And I think that was really dirty play. And I think that they were trying to just really dirty me up on the way out. And I would never do that to someone, but that's the way they roll. And that's on them. And I don't own it. And I wouldn't do that to other people. That's the way they play. I guess politics is a really dirty game. And for some reason, the Conservative Party felt the need to really do this in order to make it look valid that they were kicking me out. They were getting pushback. I know that people were saying it's true, even from people within their own caucus saying, John, she's right. It's true. You can't say that what she said is incorrect. So they had to find something else. And that's what they did. And, you just have to live with it. As I said, politics, I'm learning, is a dirty game. And these are the tricks that people play. And you can't lose sleep over every event like this. You just have to keep moving forward.
And speaking of moving forward, why don't we end this interview with an update on what the future is holding for not just yourself, but the other two MLAs who walked out of the party after you were booted out?
Well, the future holds right now. The three of us are acting as independent MLAs, and we're working together, getting to know each other, because actually the three of us weren't even super close friends when we all made these decisions. And they made their decisions. I was pushed out, and I guess I have to say that I was probably going to leave anyway, because I could see this wasn't going to be a happy experience moving forward with the Conservative Party. But we are we work together, we uphold one another, and we're enjoying our new existence, actually. It's been quite liberating, and we feel like we can actually speak for people the way we thought we were going to be able to do when we first joined the Conservative Party of British Columbia. We're authentic people. We're not seasoned politicians, but we, all three of us, have a view that the people want to hear truth, and we will continue to do that. And if we do make mistakes, we will own it and just move on from that. But so far, you know, we really want to ask the questions that need to be asked. I found that in politics, I used to wonder why people would run for something and then get into the office and then they wouldn't do the things they said they were going to do. And I would hear that, oh, there's a lot of pressure to conform and to get along. And that is really true. And I have discovered that. You are pressured to conform. And if you don't, you lose your friends. People don't talk to you. You get yelled at. You're iced out. And it's quite an experience. So I now see why it happens to so many politicians.
The First Nations Leadership Council has since come out with a statement denying everything Dallas Brodie says, even though you can see in their original statement in black and white, which, by the way, is linked for you in the description box below in the written article, that they are, in fact, calling for the criminalization of such speech. And they're continuing to do so with one of the star candidates for the Conservative Party, Aaron Gunn. How convenient. Let me know what you think of all of this in the comments. I'm Drea Humphrey for Rebel News. If you appreciate this report, you should check out my latest interview with a Kamloops ban whistleblower who tells his story about how the Kamloops ban residential school was a place he was treated well at, and how he knew right away that the unmarked grave claims were not accurate and had some firsthand experience to such. You can find that information and so much more and help support my investigation to continue finding the truth on this issue at kamloopsdocumentary.com.